Welcome to Power Up Your Practice, the go-to podcast for law firm owners and managing attorneys working on the business, not in it. I'm Ruby Powers, your guide into the heart of law practice management, bringing your insights from leading legal minds, trailblazing attorneys, and expert guests who provide practical perspectives on running your firm more effectively and efficiently. And before we dive in, I'm thrilled to announce that my latest book, Power Up Your Practice, is out and available on Amazon. It's packed with actionable advice for growing a successful law firm. Be sure to grab your copy today. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter for exclusive tips and resources. And if you're enjoying this podcast, we love your reviews. They help us reach more attorneys like you who are striving to build the practice of their dreams. Prepare to open your mind, be inspired, and power up your practice to the next level. Hey everyone, this is Ruby Powers with Power Up Your Practice. I'm excited to have two guests, Kevin Broyles and James Fisher from FisherBroyles, which is founded in 2002. It's the world's first and largest distributed full-service law firm partnership. Of the hundreds of partners in 23 global offices, they're veterans of the largest and most sophisticated law firms, corporate departments, and government agencies. And they seek to cultivate the brightest legal minds and to provide clients with exceptional service. So I'm excited to have you both on. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. So to be honest, the distributed law firm, I wasn't really familiar with that terminology, but sounds like you guys have been around and were pioneers in the space. So tell us a little bit more what that means for those who might not be as familiar with the terminology.
Well, James kind of came up with a distributed catchphrase. You want to explain that, where you came up with that?
Well, distributed was borrowed from sort of the distributed ledger phenomenon that's going on with blockchain. It just kind of fit what our model was. We're sort of a distributed, semi-autonomous organization. We're decentralized to a large extent, and it just made more sense than calling us a virtual law firm, because virtual has, kind of it's not real connotation, right? So we called ourselves the first distributed law firm. We're actually the first virtual law firm too, but we call ourselves distributed. And it makes more sense that that name distributed has caught on in the industry. So everybody, all of our competition calls themselves distributed law firms as well.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. When you come up with something that's so unique, so unusual, sometimes you just have to try to figure out, what do we call this? I mean, we had cloud-based, I think from the beginning, we didn't like the word virtual because it's an anonym of not real, or it's an anonym of real, synonymous with not real. So we prefer distributed, and hopefully that'll catch on, because in the early stages of the 2000s, I think most virtual law practices were, log on to a computer and get your will done after you fill out a form or that kind of thing. So we want to make sure that people understood that we are just as sophisticated as any other, large multi-international law firm.
Awesome.
We provide the same work product as any traditional ambulatory law firm. Our lawyers are just not necessarily in a central office somewhere.
Got it. Well,
yeah.
I guess I
didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. I guess I had a distributed law firm in 2011 when I was in Dubai, and I just didn't know about it. But I think the virtual term probably had a different connotation when you started the practice in 2002, and probably now there's different connotations. But I mean, the fact that you guys were pioneers in this space, because even when I had my firm in 2011 in Dubai, I just, we had Dropbox, Skype, Gmail, I'd have a VPN, things like that. But I don't even remember what the technology was like in 2002. So I guess walk us through sort of a little bit of that journey. Because I think when you sort of go back in time and you think about what you did and how you were a pioneer in that space, and then it makes us think about what could be possible in the future, in the future practice of law.
Yeah, the technology back then was eFax, Vonage, that kind of thing. FedEx was our technology back then to get things done.
They had Skype. Nobody used it.
Yeah. The interesting thing is our model has been strengthened and become more, we have obtained a greater competitive advantage as technology has improved. Because we were, as you can imagine, we started in 2002. So in 2012, to the extent that there was new technology that allowed you to work remote easier, it helped us a great deal. So then when things like COVID happened in 2020, we were like, well, we're already doing this, whereas everyone else had to catch up.
Yeah, you must have been able to just you were like, this is a typical day for us.
Yeah, really, the only thing that changed was how do you help your people manage, especially employees and partners who may live in urban areas where they can't go out. They're kind of stuck in a small condo or something like that. So COVID for us was just making sure that our partners and our employees were healthy mentally, that they were okay. Because, those of us who lived in the suburbs, there wasn't a lot of difference. And of course, certain states were a little bit more strict than others. So that's the only thing. But you're absolutely right. As far as functioning, we heard horror stories primarily because of staff issues. They really didn't know how to staff manage support in a remote environment, and also managing young attorneys, which we had no problem with at all, because our staff were brought on and trained to work remotely, and we have almost no associates. And to the extent we do have non-partners, they're much more experienced than a first or a second year.
But it really supercharged our business after COVID, because what it did was it removed the fear that a lot of lawyers that we were chasing to work for us, their fear of, being able to practice at a high quality or high level remotely. Once COVID hit, they figured out, they had to do it anyway, so it wasn't a big deal. And then maybe more importantly was a lot of attorneys back then were afraid of what their clients might think if they found out they were working remotely. Well, COVID, fixed that, because everybody was working remotely. Clients didn't care. So it really supercharged our business. It normalized our business is what it did. We were no longer, necessarily this weird business model. We were just an accepted model that's different than a lot of others. Now, I don't want to go so far as saying distributed law firms are mainstream, but they're not weird anymore.
Yeah. I do think with a lot of the consulting you do for people starting out with their practices, they're going straight to that virtual distributed model, and they have such a great advantage because they can keep their costs low. And like you're saying, like it became less taboo after the pandemic and became more mainstream. And now it's almost like the people with the large office spaces are the ones that are sort of the ones who have a disadvantage now.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Rate sensitivity with clients obviously is increasing over time. And traditional law firms are really good at raising rates, but they're not really good at lowering costs. So their solution to needing to make more money is always raising the rates instead of trying to make themselves more efficient. So we have that sort of advantage.
So what was it like? What's the size of your firm now? And like, I guess maybe you said it's supercharged during the pandemic, but like, what were like some of your numbers from team members from the pandemic, like 2002 to the pandemic to like now? And then maybe let's walk through some of the key things that you've learned, because you're ahead of a lot of us. You've had your practice being remote this whole time. You were 18 years ahead of the pandemic in that respect. So you're probably on a whole different iteration than some of us are.
Yeah, in 2013, I believe we had about 85 attorneys. Today we have approximately 170. And the interesting thing about a distributed model is you can grow as fast as you want. I mean, you can add because the overhead is much lower. There are a lot of great lawyers out there. Unfortunately, a lot of those great lawyers don't have revenue. So we could add 200 lawyers and be pushing 400 by this time next year because it's super easy to bring them on board and they're working remote. They're happy to be still at home. The problem is that doesn't really help our partners or our clients to bring on people who would struggle to be successful within the model. So growth is great, but it has to be strategic. It has to be wise. So that's what we're focusing on.
Right. Because part of the distributed model is we don't pay our lawyers a salary. It's compensation is based on a formula based on production only. So on the one hand, it makes the cost of us adding lawyers low, but on the other hand, it requires lawyers to actually be self-sufficient before they join us, for the most part.
Right.
Could you explain that a little bit more, of like your payment model?
Sure. Lawyers are paid by units of production versus by the hour or some kind of salary basis, which a lot of law firms do, which is really if you think about it, it's a really inefficient way of compensating someone. Because in our model, the cost of our lawyers ebbs and flows with the expense of them, right? So we think there are basically 4 pillars of activities that all partners in all law firms are generally expected to perform. One is bringing in clients, 2 is billing time, managing other lawyers or managing clients, and helping grow the firm. And each one of those 4 pillars have a formula that we attribute to and basically share the revenue with our partners.
So I see what you mean about normalizing the distributed remote virtual practice, because it when I did it back in 2011, 12, it was difficult for people to sort of be like, I don't get to come see you in person. And that was a bit of a game changer. It sort of took a while to change that paradigm. But I had a niche practice, and so that's what helped people to want to come to see me, or virtually see me, I guess you could say, or remotely see me. And that's how I was able to build that out. But I just see that between the distributed model and the salary compensation model, it must be a very lucrative model that you guys have built these last 23 years. That sounds awesome.
Well, yeah, and it's lucrative for the partners because they keep the vast majority of what they generate. So if I'm sure you're familiar with a traditional law firm where you're fortunate if you get 35% of your book in payments from the firm. In our model, you get 80% of what you generate and bring in. So we've been successful, but the people who've really been successful are the partners at our firm. I mean, many of whom join Fisher Broyles from another AmLaw 200 firm and make 2.5 to 3 times what they were making at their previous firm.
So what do you look for in someone in joining your firm that sort of meets that rubric that you were mentioning that you look for?
So it evolves over time, but generally what we're looking for is someone that has had at least 7 years experience, a material portion of which was gained at an AmLaw 200 law firm. And they can come from, like I said, either an AmLaw 200, they can come from government, whatnot. But in order to be successful, they need to have somewhere between at least $300,000 to $500,000 of business. And that kind of changes sometimes, but in the we're to the size now that we're looking for folks that have at least $500,000 of business to join. And again, it varies depending on what jurisdiction you're in, because it costs somebody more to live and support themselves in New York City than it does, say, in Dallas, right? So, but as a rule of thumb.
So you have team members all over the world or the US?
Well, we have, how many offices do we have now domestically, Kevin? Like 23, 24?
Yeah, I think we have 23 offices domestically. We also have.
Yeah, we have two offices in Mexico, one in Mexico City and one in Monterey, and we have an office in London. And we're actively in the process of opening offices other places in Europe and South America as well.
So when you say you have an office, what does that mean?
That's a great question.
It's a great question. So generally what that means is we do have offices. We have a national contract with Regis, and we have basically variable cost office space in all of our locations. Very few of our attorneys actually go there every day, but they have it at their disposal if they need it for client meetings or client conferences, depositions, whatnot. But we're charged by the hour for the actual time we use it versus it being a fixed overhead cost for us.
Okay, now that makes sense. So I think one of the things that was a big challenge for law firm owners when they went to the pandemic, or more people did this, was how do you keep the communication going? How do you have the culture? How do you keep the teamwork? And what are some of your things that you've learned as best practices? Because I think the other thing that happened, I noticed, is that after a lot of people went back to the office or more hybrid, like some of the best practices we had in the past, we sort of like forgot them and stopped doing them. And my firm is very, very hybrid. So we've been sort of resurrecting some of those really good plans and practices. And so anyway, just for those listenings, or what have you learned since you've been in this place for so long?
Well, one thing I think we learned is, what we know is that the biggest source of strife among anyone, whether that be in a personal relationship or a business relationship, is financial. So what we did in order to develop community and culture is we removed the financial issue among partners or between partners, because we have a formula-based, transparent model or compensation model, so that no one has to wonder whether they're being treated differently because of who they are. And what that does as an initial matter is it makes our partners like each other a lot more, because they're not thinking, well, I made less last year because, that jerk over there who didn't deserve it made more. That doesn't exist in our firm. So that's the foundational thing. And then after that, once you remove that, people are much more open to know each other. And we have numerous things that we do to foster that. We have 2 in-person partnership meetings per year. One is more of a networking. The other is a full-blown partnership meeting. We have practice group heads that have monthly meetings with folks in their practice group. We have a monthly partnership meeting. All of this, of course, is by Zoom. We have holiday parties where James and I will go across the country and often across the pond to London to meet with our people. We actually also have a monthly, I hate the phrase, but it's fireside chats. And the only reason I hate it is because it's been used so often, since President Roosevelt first started that. Was that 100 years ago? Almost. Yeah, but we have that where we just get on as management, and just whomever wants to join, and we talk about anything. We just had one of those yesterday. We talked about, television series and, partners visit to Normandy to see the 80th anniversary of D-Day, and just to get to know people. And we find that in traditional firms, at least when we were in traditional firms, no one wanted to get together. They just didn't like each other for the most part. And our partners really have a great time. They get together, they play golf. I was just talking to a partner 3 hours ago. I was driving and I gave him a call. He's up in DC, and he's gone to a couple of basketball games with me. And we were just planning to go to another one in Las Vegas, a tournament in November, because his alma mater's playing and my alma mater's playing. And we just enjoy, we have a passion for basketball and college basketball. And so just stuff like that, where people, because you get rid of that tension and the bitterness over money. And it works even in the opposite, because everyone's making so much more than they were making at the traditional firm. We've turned it upside down so that they're all happy about the money now. And when you can see how much you're making because one of your partners is either sharing work with you or doing work for your clients, then that also creates just more positive vibes among the partnership.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like a fun job to run around to holiday parties around the country and the world. I sign me up. No, it's not. You have to have your ugly sweater, holiday sweater for like every part. No,
I mean, just imagine, I was just say, just imagine you're in Atlanta one day, the next day you have to be in Denver, and then following that you're in Seattle, and then you're over to Boston and New York and DC. Oh, and then Miami comes in. You just and then 3 weeks later you're in London. And now that we've added Mexico City and Monterey, we'll probably be going to Mexico City at some point.
Yeah, it's hard to. We can't make all of them, and we end up having sort of this year we go to this number, and this next year we have these other folks. It can be really difficult.
So
But it's great to see our partner. We love that, but the traveling gets difficult.
are you finding yourself overwhelmed with handling phone calls and spending endless hours on consultations that just don't qualify? Well, let me introduce you to Staffy Live, your ultimate solution for 24/7 live receptionist and intake services tailored specifically for law firms. Now picture this: empathetic, truly bilingual specialists who understand the intricacies of client care and are experts at asking all the right questions to qualifying callers efficiently. Now that with Staffy Live, you'll feel like you have a trusted partner by your side, ensuring only qualified consultations make it on your calendar and providing valuable follow-ups when needed. As someone who's been using Staffy Live for my own law firm, I couldn't be happier. And I guess what Staffy Live is now offering a generous 15-day free trial with no strings attached. You can head over to staffy.cc. That's stafi.cc and click Get Started. And don't forget to use the code RUBY, RUBY. Your future self will thank you. That's awesome. And yeah, you guys answered my question, because I was going to say, like, do you ever get together or like have retreats? How many, you mentioned partners a lot. How many partners do you have?
I think Kevin said, sorry, Kevin. We're somewhere in the 170, 180 range now. It's a moving target.
Got it. So what would you say, we were talking about the future practice of law. So you've seen a lot of evolution these like 20 something years. There's a lot of so I think there was the cloud. It was huge, like what, 07, 08. Then there was a Great Recession, and then there was the pandemic. These all had like big impacts on, I think, on the practice of law and just society and the economy in general. And then the last couple of years, it's been AI. So what are sort of your predictions, having been pioneers in the future practice of law, and sort of what are you seeing now?
It's funny you mentioned. I just read an article today about It was from Australia, actually. And the article was about AI and how it would affect Australian law firms, the biggest Australian law firms, from hiring young associates. And one would think, and I still believe, that AI is going to take over a lot of the things that young associates do, right? So the traditional logic would think, well, if AI is going to take over all the things that traditional associates do, it's going to be tough for young lawyers to break into the business. But this article was counterintuitive because it said that all the large Australian firms are still, hiring young associates like they always did, and they're employing artificial intelligence to make the young associates more productive faster, which I found fascinating. Where do I think it's going to go? Well, I think there's going to be more and more distributed law firms like FisherBroyles, but I think at the very top, you're still going to have your top 50 trad law firms, but AI is going to be a significant game changer to the practice of law. It's going to make fewer lawyers more efficient. But I don't think there's any shortage of legal work. So I'm not sure how it's going to really affect, the demand for the practice of law. I just think there'll be easier access to it. But FisherBroyles is well positioned to be among the most efficient, in the future practice of law, because we're already distributed and we're employing artificial intelligence solutions at the moment. And it'd be tough to compete with a distributed law firm that's well versed in AI.
Kevin, any other thoughts?
Yes. Thomas Jefferson once said, "I'm a great believer in luck, and I find the harder I work, the more I have of it." We started something very innovative, but because of the structure of this distributed model, we've been very lucky. And I think AI is another development that is good luck for us because clients are never going to like to hear from their lawyer, "Hey, don't worry about it. Here's the work product that was completely completed by AI." The client says, "Wait a minute. I just have to trust," because, there's a lot of issues with AI giving false information, creating cases that don't exist. I mean, there are a lot of stories about that. And some lawyers who were foolish enough to not check, just use AI for citations in a brief and never bother to go check those. So I've told our partners they should assume AI is a really, really smart but unethical associate. So you have to double check them. And the part where I believe we're going to be very fortunate or lucky is that the most natural job for AI to replace in a law firm is associates, because the partners are still going to have to be there to review the work product and make sure it's correct. But the problem our competition has, the traditional law firms, is they rely heavily, their financial model is heavily leveraged on associates. So once those associates are removed and you've saved those costs by utilizing AI, the clients aren't going to sit back and say, "Oh, this is great. We have all this innovation from AI, but I'm still paying you for associates, even though you're using AI. Where's my advantage? Where's the discount that I get because of all this technological advancement?" So I think the traditional law firms are in trouble in that regard because they'll no longer be able to rely on their cash cows, which are young associates who are billing astronomical hourly rates, but not really providing all that much value to clients. Whereas in our model, we have more seasoned attorneys and we can utilize AI to make our senior a senior attorneys more efficient, but there is no replacement of a key revenue figure that we've relied on for years and years because we simply don't have a model that heavily relies on associates.
Yeah, I think I heard a statistic about how some firms were stopping to hire the first 5-year associates, 1 to 5 or so, because they were able to replace a lot of their work with AI tools. And I don't know, all this talk is making me think about the supply chain disruption with training attorneys and what's going to happen there, especially since I'm a law school professor adjunct and think about the future of their careers as well. But no, I agree. I was just saying recently, like, I think sometimes people use numbers as like a bragging rights to how big or how maybe profitable an entity is. But with tech companies, they brag at how small they are and how many staff members they have, but yet they can still hit huge revenue goals. And a lot of the talk from all the tech conferences and all of that right now is like the billable hour is the archaic model in which it sort of encourages inefficiency. And I think all the firms that are like similar to yours, like finding ways to leverage the technology to pass on savings to clients and efficiency. That's really where it's going to be at. So like, I think that remote distributed virtual model was like one of the waves of being a pioneer. And then cloud was one, then the virtual remote distributed, and then now the AI, which has been out for a long time, but it's been mainstream for the last few years and different iterations and watching different law firm owners and how they implement it. But definitely, I do agree. Those who've been experimenting and leveraging and using it, the more are going to be ahead than the more traditional practices.
You know what the irony is about big law or trad law is that they utilize, well, let me back up. They have most, if not all, the technology that FisherBroyles has. They just don't use it like it was intended to, right? So the biggest source of inefficiency in a law firm is super low tech. It's just real estate, right?
Yeah.
Or paying young associates a couple $100,000 a year when they don't know what they're doing. You eliminate first-year associate salaries and real estate that no one really wants to use anymore. Well, then you've got a lot of margin to play with to pay your lawyers more and charge your clients less. I mean, it's not super, it's not a technical solution. I mean, that's the irony. It's not really a technical solution. And then you add AI to the mix, and AI is going to help traditional law at the margins. But unless traditional law really takes a huge bite of what's most inefficient, which is the real estate and young lawyers' salaries, there's no amount of AI that's going to make them competitive with a distributed law firm. I mean, it's still going to be inefficient. I mean, but they'll never change.
Well, yeah, that's the whole change. Like the tech has changed at such a rapid pace versus human nature, and lawyers were very risk adverse. So it's hard. And then I think that's the whole thing about the future practice of law is like who is most willing to adapt and innovate and be ready for even further for the future. And that's, that you'll be ahead.
Well, and that's our competitive advantage is that, most entrepreneurs or business people, when they look to start a business, they say, well, I want to be like Henry Ford or John D. Rockefeller, or more recently, Jeff Bezos, except for lawyers. Law firms never think that way. So, why is it that Amazon was started, was it 20, 30 years ago? And it basically said, well, we don't really need the real estate to sell you books. And everyone's like, oh, that's brilliant. And they put so many bookstores out of business. Whereas law firms, they just sit around and say, no, we're going to do it the same old way that we've done it for 120 years. Nothing to see here. And it's no wonder that they, when entrepreneurial lawyers come along, they just mop the floor with the traditional law firms.
Yeah, that's a lot. I agree with you. And you just figure out what are the rules we have to play by, and then and don't just do what it's always been done. Like for me, I was my husband took a job in Dubai, so I was like, well, I'm not going to give up my practice that I've built up for the last year and a half, and then how can I turn this disadvantage into an advantage? And then after that, everyone's like, whoa, you did that. And I'm like, yeah. And then, and that was a while ago. And so then I've just sort of stayed in that space, but no, I completely agree. And I do think we're going to see sort of those who are less willing to adapt, so probably have a hard time staying in this space. And we're gonna see sort of that, sort of that divergence between those who are more tech and entrepreneurial mindset, and into the future of practice of law. Well, I think that we're getting to the end. I don't know. I've had fun talking about this and learning more about your practice and sort of way you see things. Okay, so whoever wants to answer this question, what is your favorite board game?
Monopoly.
Okay, that's the most common answer. Do you have a type of Monopoly, or you just straight up Monopoly?
Straight up old school Monopoly.
All right. Okay, what is your superpower?
My superpower is allowing people to freely do whatever they choose to do. We found in business that you waste so much time trying to convince people to do something different. Just let them have the responsibility and the accountability and have no guilt about it. And I think that just leads to more peace and less stress in your life when you realize you can't control other people. So you just let them go.
Awesome. What is a habit that you believe contributes to your success?
I think not taking what?
Not taking no for an answer.
I think it's having habits themselves, just staying consistent. Treating our firm is founded on consistency. So that's one habit we definitely have is you whether you're a 10 million partner or 700,000 partner, we're consistent with how the firm treats you, and so that consistency is a habit.
Yeah, that's a good way. Yeah, that's a good saying. Treat people like you want them to treat you.
Yeah. I came up with that question after watching James Clear at a conference via keynote, and I just was like, where I'm interviewing a lot of successful people, and you don't really get to see the behind the scenes, like what do they do to their day-to-day life. And so that's why I like to see what people say when I ask that. So what's a favorite book or podcast that you'd like to recommend?
I found a book called The E-Myth a few years ago, and I absolutely love it. I think it's outstanding, talking about how to be an entrepreneur, the mythical idea of the entrepreneur. It's basically just about hard work and replicating yourself, which is probably the biggest challenge in growing and sustaining a business. Is how do you replicate yourself?
Yeah, I'm a huge Michael Gladwell. Is it Michael Gladwell? Malcolm Gladwell. Excuse me, Malcolm Gladwell. So his books, like my favorite book of his is Outliers. I kind of consider me and Kevin outliers.
Yeah, I definitely suggest both of those books. Those are great. And if someone hasn't read E-Myth or like Traction, I think that those are definitely key books for running a business. And so, I mean, I think constantly learning and improving is key. So how can, Kevin and James, how can people connect with you, stay in touch, and keep the conversation going after listening to this podcast?
FisherBroyles.com.
Yep, you can find us there. You can find us on LinkedIn. we're out there. We're pretty easy to locate, and certainly if lawyers out there are interested in doing something innovative against the grain, then go to our recruiting page at FisherBroyles.com.
You can Google us. You can chat GPT us. You can look us on LinkedIn. I mean, we're everywhere.
You're findable. Okay, that's good. Well, great to have you both. I've learned a lot about some pioneers in that space. I thought I was a pioneer, but you were both about 9 years ahead of me, and at a different scale with the size of your practice as well. And I do think we're in some exciting times with the future practice of law, and just constantly seeing what opportunities are out there, and just being able to pivot and move forward. And that's what you've been able to do, and take those changes as an advantage. So thank you, Kevin and James, for joining us today. Thanks everyone for listening. We definitely want to promote the school community, SKOOL, with Power Up Your Practice. We're growing there. We're having a lot of different conversations that we have in between the podcast episodes. So thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning in to the Power Up Your Practice Law Practice Management Podcast. I'm your host, Ruby Powers, and it's been a pleasure sharing this time with you. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave us a review, tell someone else about us, and I would love to get this podcast shared with others to reach more listeners like you. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter for exclusive content, tips, and updates straight to your inbox. And exciting news, our book, The Power Up Your Practice, is out and available on Amazon. It's packed with strategies, 25 chapters, to help you elevate your practice and achieve your goals. So join us next week as we dive into more advice and insight on law practice management. We'll see you next time.